In North Europe, the Öresund Strait connected the Baltic Sea with the North Sea, an area of 10 miles that separates Denmark and Sweden, and it is exposed to extreme weather conditions. But there is a problem, and it is shores. Copenhagen in Denmark needs more housing. Malmö in Sweden needs more work. If both ports are put together, it will create an important economic center, and Bruges will make then a great metropolis. However, it has never been possible until now. The Öresund Bridge is the largest cable stayed bridge in the world. It not only supports the traffic of cars, but also heavy trains. On highway of 1,090 meters of rail cables 160 meters above sea level. The support towers have 270 meters high. An agreement has reached with the two countries, so the war must be completed in 5 years, and they had to build an island, and bridge, and tunnel underwater. The priority was the island, which must be complete in 14 months. Thus, war began on the August 14 in 1995, when the first pylons of stone in the middle of the street were placed. These piles of stone were turned into as island where once there was only water. The first step was to establish a perimeter with stone from the quarry in Sweden. More than 1 billions of them were necessary for its construction, and then they had to fill it. It was a task that required thousands of cubic meters of material, but Denmark and Sweden have this extra material at the bottom of the sea. On the second phase, the excavation began. Here they had to dig for material and making a slot in the tunnel, but they had to find a place to put the debris. Around 11 million cubic meters were dug per day. This work here the world's largest dredger, the Chicago, which they to make cubic meter of sediment on the one time. The distance separated Sweden of Denmark was only 10 miles, but the cultural gap entre between the two countries was very large, by current, language, and some other cultural aspects. Not even the cars drove on the same track. Trains working with a different voltage and fire system had to be installed in two forms as were used in the countries. The next step was the construction of the submerged tunnel, which would be one of the longest in the world. The idea was to do 20 sections and the ensemble dead into 30 under the sea. They had 170 meters in length, 30 inches in width, and meter high, with two tubes for vehicles, two for trains, and for emergency. They had to burn one the how piece each month during the 20 months. They used 40 millions steel bark. They were bought 7 million gallons of concrete were used the weighs 55 million kilos. Moving this heavy structure was a challenge. The solution to the problem was moving it by barge. First, they had to cover in all holes 100 steel over 3,000 kilos each, and the giant structure floated. It took 100 milliliters the hour, the water, to float. The file there they were boiling, and they had the two levels were with sea level to head the piece into sea. Then they had to taper pieces of the structures so big that it was not easy text. It was required the use of the wing floated some special tank of water to keep the structure level.
Once at the bottom, they removed the water tanks and melted a concrete floor of a meter thick in the structure to prevent it from floating. They placed rocks on the structure as well. When the 13th piece was placed, a problem arose when the sinker sank the piece. The section began to bend down and collapsed. It plunged violently into the sea, and the ship's bridge engineers cut off the electricity to prevent an electric shock until they knew what had happened. The verdict was human error. A plate was not properly sealed and floated, causing it to break the steel ropes that held it, and it sank. Luckily, no one was injured. Once the tunnel was finished, they had to build the largest suspension bridge in the world. The construction began with the towers. The foundations were built on a pier. It was huge and had its base in 1,500 square meters. Its weight was more than 18 million pounds. However, it was more difficult to carry. To transport the towers, they produced two huge barges which joined with two beams forming a giant barge. 4 tugs were needed to carry the towers along the channel. They got only 2 columns joined by a beam under the bridge to avoid destroying the entire structure if there was an aircraft accident. The towers became independent in construction areas with equipment small enough to any factory. The 2 legs of the towers rose in sections of 4 feet, one always 40 feet higher than the other to prevent the 2 cranes from colliding. When they reached the 44 metro, they added the beam, and when they arrived at 80 meters, they integrated a steel box to hold the cables of the structure first, and then every 12 feet to reach the final. While the towers were built on land, the sea there were built 2-story structures of steel and concrete bridge, which were 140 meters long by 23 meters wide. It contained a 4-lane road for vehicle traffic on top and dual carriageway for the trains at the bottom. Huge sections were assembled on the ground, and they had to lift 60 meters and then maintaining the section suspended in the air until the cables were installed. To make this work, they built a super crane christened named Swan. The Swan had to use 70% of its force to lift this section. The highest piece was placed next to the tower after workers had to lay the cable. The first 50 meters and each half would be a bit more longer than the previous longest cable, which was 260 meters. The Swan brought another section. The cantilever bridge was beginning to move away from the tower and near the world record. The link was at its most delicate. Swan helped, but the bridge would not hold securely until all leads were installed. On November 14 of 1999, the Swan placed the final section of the bridge connecting Denmark and Sweden from the first time. The Prince of Denmark and Princess Victoria of Sweden met for the first time in this border area. It was built for 9 years, and finally the 1st of July 2000 at 11 at night, the Orson channel of communication opened to the public on time and within the budget.